Enzo Maresca has just been saved by Reece James. For me, that was diabolical, that second half. And I just don't understand where this form is coming from. I just don't get it. Reece James has done you an absolute favour, Maresca. You are currently your own worst enemy. I've got to say that. I've got to get it off my chest because Chelsea have just drawn 2-2 to Bournemouth. And quite honestly, it could have been a loss. The way we played in the second half, I mean, it's concerning at times. The way we played in the first half is also concerning because for me, there's real issues with this Chelsea team and being clinical right now in front of goal. But there's also real issues with the manager and his in-game management. That wasn't really an issue for me prior to December. I felt like every now and then there was a couple of things. I think back to the Liverpool game. Substitutions probably took us out of that game rather than helped us get back into it. But it was drips and drabs of little mistakes that he was fixing the next game. And they weren't really affecting the results too much. Now they're affecting the results. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Since we beat Brentford, I genuinely think Enzo Maresca has lost Chelsea more games than the players, or drawn Chelsea, or been the reason Chelsea have drawn games than the players. And look, that isn't taking all the weight off the players, because today, first half, Maresca can't score all those chances that the players missed. I look at Nicholas Jackson, and he absolutely is proving why we need another striker. Proving why Chelsea need to go and buy someone. Because for me, this squad lacks goals. And this is why I'm so annoyed at the way Nkunku's been managed. Because I genuinely think if Nkunku was playing in his correct position and the manager could just adapt his philosophy a little bit to fit this guy in, you're guaranteeing yourself at least 10 to 15 more Premier League goals a season with a player like Nkunku getting into this team. Also with a player like João Felix, I think you add some creativity there that could definitely free up this team to score more goals. And I think he's being a little bit harsh and very naive to think that this system is better without those sort of players in. But Nicholas Jackson is reaffirming what everyone said. John Obi Mikel at the beginning of the season said, Chelsea realistically can't go and fight for the biggest honours in the country and in European football with Nicholas Jackson as their main number 9. And you know what? For a period of time, I actually felt like he'd rubbish that claim, Jackson, with the form that he was in. But today, I mean, the hold-up play for Cole Palmer's goal is absolutely fantastic. The fact he arrived in every single position that he did today to have these opportunities is fantastic. But when it comes to those small margins, whether the ball ends up in the back of the net or not, it's not so good. And unfortunately, that's the difference between being a team that can beat Bournemouth or a team that is above Bournemouth in the Premier League fighting for bigger stuff than Bournemouth. And right now, it looked a little bit too equal out there in the second half. And I think that was something that happened because a player like Jackson wasn't able to take his chances in the first half. I think that ultimately is why there is such a call from the fans, because after 4 transfer windows, let's be honest, only bringing in Jackson realistically as the number 9 and Mark Guy, it's not enough, is it? It's just not, and we saw that today. But look, I'll praise Cole Palmer because I think the way he took that goal, the way he sat down Travers in the Bournemouth net was unbelievable, and the finish is so cold, as per usual with the kid. It's becoming so reliable. He's saved Poch numerous times last season. He's now doing it again with Maresca in terms of being able to put points on the board. If it wasn't for Cole Palmer today, as well as obviously Reece, Chelsea probably don't come away from that game with a draw. I think he's a fantastic player. And look, people joke about Cole Palmer FC, but just think actually, where would this team be in the previous 2 seasons since Palmer's signed without him? Because he is quite literally a phenom. He is that good. He is without doubt for me in the top 3 Premier League players right now. I think without him, we all know where Chelsea would be, because I just don't think the other players have been pulling their weight. And I think that's an area of concern. I think this is where we then go into the second half and we've got to talk about Enzo Maresca's in-game management. I think first half, for me, I felt like Chelsea had a number of opportunities. I actually felt like, yes, Chelsea controlled the game, but the game was a little bit more open. I felt like the game was a little bit end-to-end. Look, Bournemouth didn't have opportunities. They were getting caught in possession a little bit, and it allowed Chelsea to counter-attack them. I've said this a number of times. When this Chelsea team has the game opened up, I just think they absolutely thrive. the type of individuals in this team and the pace that it has and the raw ability, I think this team thrives in a game that opens up. But the manager, Maresca, he doesn't want that. He wants this team to have control. And at times, there are games when that's the right solution. But for me, sometimes there are games where less control, this Chelsea team look a little bit better. Or not necessarily less control, but just allowing that ball to move a little bit more freely, having further to run because you're not as pushed up onto the defence by their own goal, just makes such a difference for me. And I think you can evidently see that in this Chelsea team. The second half, I feel like his approach was have a bit more control. I think the possession stat rose by about 10%. Slow it down, get control of the game, try and play this team off the park, tire them. I think that played into Bournemouth's hands because then when we were sloppy in the second half, which we were, I mean, the amount of times we gave the ball away, a number of different players, Bournemouth counter-attacked us. Bournemouth looked like they were capable of hurting us pretty much every time they went forwards. And I think players like Semenyo caused Chelsea issues today. And we ultimately saw that eventually this team got themselves back into the game from literally nowhere in the first half. I think in the first half, Chelsea had 3 big chances, 13 shots to Bournemouth's 1. That's where they were in the first half. But in the second half, I mean, Chelsea let Bournemouth back into the game by slowing the game down, by having that extra pass, by trying to play that extra one. We caused ourselves issues because that was normally the pass where we weren't good enough. We gave the ball away and it allowed Bournemouth back into the game. And obviously the penalty is what it is. I think some people will moan, some people won't. But for me, it's a pen. I don't really have too much of an issue with that because if it was against my team, I'd probably say it's a penalty. Look, Sanchez, arguably, when you look at where Kluivert's gone, I actually think he's gone the wrong way if he's done any homework. And obviously we saw again today, Sanchez proving to be a liability. We saw him giving the ball away again to the Bournemouth team, not helping out his Chelsea teammates by being that lackadaisical on the ball. We've seen it time and time again. We don't need to go into it. It's every game now with Sanchez, unfortunately. But this is where you start to feel a shift in momentum. And if you go and look at the momentum for the whole game, Chelsea pretty much were dominating up until this point, bar a little spell in the first half. As soon as that momentum started to shift, especially after the penalty, that's when I look to my manager and I think this is where you switch this game up to make sure that this game doesn't get away from us. And nothing happens. The philosophy doesn't change. Obviously, I understand that. I understand why he's so adamant to play one way. Because if he doesn't, the players won't buy into his philosophy as much. It's as simple as that. But also, if you're losing games because of your philosophy, the players also will not buy into your philosophy. It's a difficult fine line to manage as a manager if you're one of these newer systematic managers rather than a pragmatic manager. It's very, very, very difficult to find that line. And we've seen that again. We saw it against Fulham. We've seen it in other games. We're seeing it now. We saw it in Everton. Wasn't going our way. We didn't really change much up. And then we see it again today against a Bournemouth side that were growing into the game. And ultimately, he made the change to bring on Reece in midfield for a Lavia who's obviously managing minutes. Both of them are, obviously. And it was probably good to see that they swapped for each other. But ultimately, Reece in midfield is just something I won't get my head around. Even though he's played minutes there, Reece James is an out-and-out, up-and-down fullback, as Maresca calls it. We all have seen just how good Reece James can be in that position. Maresca's refusal to use fullbacks, I think, is actually starting to cause him an issue. Because I don't think Semenyo scores that goal if he's playing a system that allows his fullbacks to be out-and-out, up and down. Yes, Reece didn't look that sharp against an unbelievably sharp Semenyo. And neither did Josh. And I think Josh was a little bit slow getting out to where he was. And Enzo, I don't really think helped the situation. And actually, it was pretty poor from Chelsea's point of view. But the finish from Semenyo is unbelievable to put Bournemouth 2-1 up. And that's concerning that Chelsea didn't really manage that. Maresca didn't see those kind of issues arising. He then drags Josh basically to put the blame on him and bring on Tosin when we're 2-1 down, chasing the game. I think he kills the young kid there. And I get it, football's harsh and football is horrible. and it's not a nice place to be when things are going wrong, right? But I also think there's a way to go about it. And when you're 2-1 down, you don't bring on a centre-back. I don't think you do that, because I don't think Josh was having that poor a game that he needed to drag him like that. I think he could have made an attacking substitution first, allowed that player to get back into the game, and then pull Josh 5 minutes later. And then Josh wouldn't feel like it was his whole mistake. But as soon as that goal went in, he dragged him pretty much. And I don't think that's a good move. I really don't. I think it's a little bit ruthless, and I think it shows a manager who's a little bit out of control in that situation, because I think he's lost the game there. And look, I don't think he ever got it back. I think until João Felix ultimately came on, Chelsea didn't look like they were threatening enough. I just think he added a little bit more spark that maybe concerned the Bournemouth defence a little bit as their legs were going. Ultimately, we win a free kick. Reece James absolutely digs Maresca out of a huge hole that he's dug himself and saves him. And I have to say that Maresca quite obviously let that game get away from him today. His in-game management, whether it's substitutions that often come too late or don't seem to be the right subs for the moment, or the actual game and the way the opposing manager is changing up his team, moving his chess pieces around, I don't see Maresca reacting to it. And when I look at the top managers in the league, and I look at some of these managers at other clubs with less spending power and slightly worse squads, I ultimately think they're doing a much better job than him. And in the last 5 Premier League games, it's just not been good enough. Even that first half against Morecambe was pretty diabolical. And right now, it's all on Maresca, in my honest opinion. Maresca and the sporting directors, because the sporting directors were well aware of where this squad was at, well aware that this could happen. Look, maybe I got carried away as a fan thinking we've gone ahead of that. That we don't regress here. We don't get worse. Actually, no. It was pretty much obvious to see, if you look at it with hindsight, a manager who's inexperienced and players who are inexperienced, as soon as they hit that speed bump, this is what we saw last year. And it doesn't feel that dissimilar. But at times, we're playing better football than I think we were under Pochettino. I think that is currently Maresca's saving grace. And the fact we started off the season in the way that we did. But the longer this is going on, this streak that we're in, the more it looks like it might have been a honeymoon period. So I'm not going to sit here and start saying that we need to get rid of Maresca, because I just feel like this club does need stability, and I hope the sporting directors have got the right man for the job. But the current January transfer window, again, is volatile. Chelsea could move on 5-6 players. The revolving door is non-stop. And that makes me feel like the manager is absolutely considered part of the revolving door philosophy. If it's not working, get him out, go again. And that just seems to be the case. And I don't know if that's what Chelsea need. But Maresca needs to learn, as do the players and as do the sporting directors, because I think this squad is in dire need of more quality. And I can't believe I have to say that after the amount of money that's been put into it. And I think off the back of today, we are seeing what happens when you put together an inexperienced team and an inexperienced manager. I think we're seeing that, and we've seen it in the last few weeks. I really hope Chelsea can do something about this, because right now this form isn't good enough. And one of the main reasons is the manager. And that is harsh, but true, unfortunately. And Maresca has to do better, as do a number of players on the pitch, even though I think, for the most part, in the first half, a clinical striker probably makes the difference there. Or another player on top of Cole Palmer, capable of scoring and putting up numbers, probably makes the difference there. And unfortunately, there's a reluctance to use the ones we've got in our squad, and probably there isn't enough of them. And for the money spent, they should never be issues. Look, not great. It's not going swimmingly for Chelsea. We're hanging on by an absolute thread to this top 4 battle right now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I think this just shows how hard and how brutal the Premier League can be, because teams like Bournemouth, if you even slip a tiny bit, it just shows. And I actually think back to the end of last season when Chelsea played Bournemouth at Stamford Bridge, when Caicedo scored from the halfway line. I actually think the Chelsea side that played Bournemouth that day against a very similar outfit were probably ahead of where this Chelsea team are right now. But I don't want to suggest that Pochettino's team was ahead of where Maresca's is, because I think Maresca clearly at points this season has been miles ahead of where Pochettino had the team. But it's not great, and we need to sort this out. Drop a like on the video. If we could get 30 likes, that would be fantastic. Look, I know things aren't going well. We'll be back to discuss it in further detail throughout the rest of the week. Check me out on all the socials if you haven't already. TikTok's been absolutely fantastic, the support over there recently. I've got to praise all of you guys for that. We're on the road to 4K. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, because over 50% of you currently aren't subscribed to the channel. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know where everyone's at with Chelsea right now, because it's confusing. I'm starting to feel torn between my head and my heart with the Chelsea side, and I thought we'd gone away from that in the last sort of 4 months prior to this current one that we're sort of in now, which is starting to extend into a second one. I'll catch you all in a bit.